If you're having trouble getting your bile flowing correctly, this video is going to give you some troubleshooting and some extra steps you can take to get that stubborn bile moving like it should. If you haven't already watched our video on 5 steps to improve bile flow, click the link up here and jump over and watch that video now, and then you can hit the back button on your browser to come back to see this video and see any turbo moves you might need if in case the basic steps don't work. But that video also gives you some indications of some markers that you can watch to see if bile is improving, as well as all the basic steps that you really need to do first. Those basic steps are going to help about 80% of the people who do them, and this video is going to give some help for those who have really stubborn bile flow and really need some extra effort. Let's jump in.
TC Hale is not a doctor and does not claim to be a doctor or licensed in any type of medical field. Don't be an idiot and use anything heard on the show as medical advice. This information should be used for educational purposes only, and you should contact your doctor for any medical advice. Now get off me.
Now, if you've taken the steps that we talk about in the 5 steps to improve bile flow video, and you're not seeing improvement to your bile flow, the first thing we need to look at is, are you using the right supplements? It's really common for people to be using supplements that people say will help improve bile, but they just don't help it flow better. The confusion sets in because some people just need a really little boost. So if they use one of these other herbs or something like that that people think improve bile, they may see some improvement. But the people who have a significantly backed up bile and really need to thin it so it'll flow correctly don't see improvement when they use some supplements like that. Now, did you use some cheap beetroot supplement instead of the beet flow supplement that we talk about using? Beetroot doesn't do anything to thin the bile, and that's one of the most common mistakes that we see. Again, we're not the manufacturers of beet flow, and this is not a paid promotion video for beet flow. It's just what we see works the best, and it's what we use with our clients. So you really want to use beet flow from Empirical Labs, and you can learn how to use that better in the 5 steps to improve bile flow video. Now, if you are using the beet flow supplement, the first thing you want to do to kick things up a notch is to do what we call a beet flow flush on one day, and then the following day you want to do either a coffee enema or use a coffee suppository. So we teach how to do a beet flow flush in this video, and we'll put the link in the description below this video. It's really simple to do. It's really easy. It doesn't cause a lot of discomfort for most people, and you could do it about once a week or so. So what we like to see people do is do the beet flow flush on one day because that really works to thin the bile, and then the following day do the coffee suppository or a coffee enema because that works to dilate or open up that biliary pathway that the bile is supposed to flow through. So the combination of really aggressively thinning the bile and then also dilating that pathway to make it easier to flow through seems to be the most effective step that we see people make. And they'll do that step once every 5 to 7 days for 4 or 5 weeks if they need to really get stubborn bile moving, and that's usually going to be the step that works for most people. Now, when you do your beet flow flush, one way to really turbocharge that is to take 2 capsules of choline at the end of that flush. Now, choline is really good at thinning bile, and if it's appropriate for you, you could use it on every meal as well to help accelerate the ability to thin the bile out. The problem is only some people can use choline, and your breath rate needs to be a little bit faster to use choline, or you're going to create oxygen utilization issues and a lot of other energy production problems, and it's going to make you feel really lousy. So you want to test your breath rate. You can just set a kitchen timer for like a minute and count how many times you inhale for a minute. Don't count inhale as 1 and exhale as 2. Just count the inhales. And if it's 14 or higher, then you could probably use a little bit of choline without creating a whole bunch of trouble. But if your breath rate is lower than 12, you really don't want to use choline because that can create a lot of trouble for you. But if choline is appropriate for your body chemistry, this is a great way to really turbocharge things and get bile thinned out a little bit faster. The next thing to consider is a lot of times someone just needs to stop doing the wrong thing. You know, they're doing something like they're pounding grains all day, they're eating all these processed foods, both of which have the ability to thicken up the bile, and they think that they can just take some beet flow and outweigh the harm that they're doing with all these foods that are thickening up the bile. Another major mistake is if someone is on like birth control that can raise estrogen levels, or they're using some type of medication or estrogen therapy, and they think that, well, I can just still use this beet flow since so many people say it works well, and I'm going to outweigh the powerful pharmaceutical drugs. And it's kind of like trying to stand in front of a locomotive train with a hammer and trying to stop the train. It's not going to go well. A hammer is a great tool, but it's not a powerful enough tool to stop a locomotive. So if you're using pharmaceutical medications that are elevating estrogen level, that elevated estrogen is really going to thicken up bile and restrict its ability to flow correctly. And most people are not going to be able to outweigh that just using a natural concentrated beet greens juice supplement like beet flow. It's just not going to be enough to do the job. So a lot of times we might need to talk to our doctor, hey, what other options do I have? What other things can I do that can allow me to remove the need for this medication that's raising my estrogen levels? What other moves do you have so that I can get my bile flowing correctly? So work with your doctor on that. I'm not telling anybody to stop taking a medication. You really need to work with your doctor to do that. But it is important to understand that something like beet flow or coffee enemas or coffee suppositories are not going to be powerful enough to outweigh a strong pharmaceutical medication. It's just not going to happen. The next most common problem that we see is really excessive stress in someone's life or stress in the body. And either form of stress can really elevate those stress hormones like estrogen that are going to thicken up the bile, and it's going to have a hard time overpowering that with something like beet flow or coffee suppositories. So we really want to find a way to reduce the stress in our life or reduce the stress that the body is dealing with. It's really common for someone to be dealing with some type of undiagnosed infection or overgrowth in the digestive system or yeast, mold, or fungal issue. These things go undiagnosed all the time, and people can be dealing with these invaders for years or decades. And when the body is dealing with an invader like that, it's a major stress on the body. A lot of the resources are going towards keeping this invader in check, and that's making the body very stressed because it doesn't have resources to run all the other functions it's trying to run. And that stress can elevate those stress hormones that can thicken up the bile and keep it from flowing correctly. So when someone's dealing with an issue like this and they're trying to take steps to thin out their bile, a lot of times they just can't keep up with the pace. The stress that the body is dealing with is too great, and until they can figure out what that is and get that under control, they may have a hard time getting their bile flowing correctly. So if you kind of feel like maybe your immune system isn't so strong, maybe you catch colds kind of easily, a lot of times it's about the fact that the body is dealing with this invader all the time. It can't deal with something else coming in. So if you're having symptoms like that, see if you can find some type of functional medicine doctor that can really help you look and figure out if you have some type of invader going on. Now, after all of this, as long as you're eating some dietary fats that will actually trigger the body to move bile like it's supposed to, if you're eating some kind of low-fat diet, then that can be a big problem in itself. So I like to make sure that people understand, oh yeah, I should be eating some dietary fat. Now, as long as you're doing that and these other steps are not working for you, it's time to consider that you might not be producing enough bile. Now, this is really rare. We don't see this very often, but it's absolutely possible, and it's something that we see enough that you need to keep it in mind. So one step that you can test out is you can supplement with ox bile or TUDCA. Now, we're real picky about people supplementing with this. We usually don't like people to supplement with ox bile or TUDCA unless they've lost their gallbladder and they really need a bile source, since there's no place for bile to be stored. But we have a video on who should not be using ox bile. We'll put a link in the description below this video so you can check that out, and we'll dig a little bit deeper into this topic there. But what you can do is you can test out using some ox bile or TUDCA and see, does that improve any of your digestive symptoms that may go on, like when you eat fats, you get nauseous, or maybe you don't feel well and you're not digesting those very well. If you supplement with ox bile or TUDCA and those symptoms improve, then you can continue to do that as sort of like a crutch until you can get your bile moving correctly. Because here's what's interesting. When you supplement with ox bile, it can actually stimulate your body to make more bile. So that can reduce how long you have to use this ox bile. The tricky thing is that you really don't want to use ox bile or TUDCA with your meals, because both of those are alkaline in the stomach, and they'll reduce your stomach acid and reduce your ability to break down your food properly and digest your food correctly. We like to see people take those supplements away from meals. But if you're really getting nauseous or having trouble with dietary fats, you can try supplementing with a very small amount. And if you are, we really prefer to see people also using some type of acidification system with their food, whether they're using HCl or maybe some apple cider vinegar. And we teach people how to do that in my book, Kick Your Fat in the Nuts. Chapter 3 and 4 really go over all that, and the book is available on Amazon. But I'm going to put a link in the description below this video so you can get the whole thing totally for free, and it'll walk you through those steps to understand how to do those things. So just don't jump to the ox bile or the TUDCA first when you haven't done these other steps, because it's just a crutch and you're also reducing your ability to digest your food correctly. The ox bile and the TUDCA doesn't do anything to thin your bile so that it can flow correctly. It's just supplying your body with this bile that it can use to digest that meal. You're also not opening up your biliary pathway so the body can detox the way that it's supposed to. So the ox bile and the TUDCA are not the solutions, but if it happens to be the situation where you're not producing enough bile, it can help you correct that problem in those rare circumstances. So those are some steps to really turbocharge things if you seem to be having some trouble getting bile moving. But right now, if you haven't seen it, jump over to our video on how to do a beet flow flush, because you're going to need that step to really get things going if you have stubborn bile flow. I can't wait to hear about your results.